welcome to Reaching the Rest podcast, episode 21. This podcast was inspired by a desire to get to know global workers on a deeper level, to hear the stories of those who have dedicated their lives to fulfilling the Great Commission. My name is Amy Clausen, and I'm the missions director at Bethel's Rock Church in Minnesota. Today, it is our honor to sit down with Steve and Julie Kramer, who minister with their family in the Netherlands. Hi, Steve and Julie. Thanks so much for being with us here today.
Hey, it's so wonderful to be here with you today.
Thank you for having us.
Absolutely. Well, can we just get started by you guys telling us a little bit about yourself and your family and where you minister?
Absolutely. We are Steve, Julie, Case and Selah Kramer, and we're missionaries to the Netherlands. And let's say a little bit about ourselves. I guess we've just celebrated this last summer 20 years of marriage.
Congratulations.
So that's where it all starts. I'll have Julie tell a little bit about our kids.
Yeah.
And then
We have two kids. Our son, Case, he has a Dutch name, and he is 16, and our daughter, Selah, just turned 13. So they are both playing on basketball teams here in the Netherlands, and they just started a youth group. So they just had one of their first nights of meeting together, so it was really exciting for them.
Yeah.
So they're adapting well, learning to ride bikes, and so it's going good.
Good.
Yeah, our son actually rides to basketball practice. It's about a 5-6 mile bike ride,
Wow.
And we moved here from Southern California. So last night he came home and he had a couple inches of snow on top of his hoodie, and his face was frozen in ice. That's, you think your kids are ready for missions, and that's when they really get tested. But we're doing great. A little bit about us. We've been missionaries for 23 years combined.
Wow.
12 of those years. And we have really interesting story. We were here for 10 years. Thank God, and we'll get into that. But God brought us back to the States as U.S. missionaries for about 11 years. And now we're back since July. And so we're absolutely loving it. This has always felt like home, and it's good to be back here in Dutch country.
Yeah, absolutely. So when you were there before, that means your kids would have been what ages when you were when you initially went over there?
Yeah, so they were both born here in the Netherlands. So they, so our son was born in one of our first terms, and then our daughter later. So so they were both born here.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think you asked when we left. I think our son we had, it's a little difficult to do all the math the older you get, but I think he was around 5.
Okay.
It's interesting. We actually live in a house, if you can believe this, where we can overlook. He actually, from his bedroom, can overlook where he went to preschool.
Oh, wow.
And so that really kind of is, it's a strange experience for all of us, because we remember that. It's like like the sequel, And then our daughter was about a year and a half old, so she probably doesn't remember too much, But what's been really great, and this isn't like on the script or anything, but anybody who's thinking about, we got that question a lot, like, do you guys know what you're doing? You're bringing your older kids back on the mission field, but when God speaks to you and says go, he makes a way. And our kids absolutely, they would tell you on the call on this video that they absolutely love it, and they're learning Dutch and they're jumping right in. And what's been amazing, as we itinerated, we always said our kids aren't just missionary kids, but they're kids that are missionaries.
Yeah,
And
that's
it
good.
sounds kind of, honestly, it sounds a little bit cliche, but man, our kids just bought in, where they're actually disappointed if they don't speak when I speak, or they just see them. So our son said, I want to start a youth group for our church, and he did, and our daughter's getting involved. And so that to us really, if your family isn't all in on it, and you can't force that. That's it's nothing. It's like marriage. You can't force a good marriage, It just either happens or it doesn't. So we really count it to be a great blessing. And what's interesting too is that missions heart is really contagious, where now they're both coming and saying, you know what, I think we're gonna be missionaries as well. And so we love it.
That's incredible. Well, I know you alluded to, we'll get more to that, but let's just get to it now. So tell us your story. How did you get called to the field the first time? What did that look like to be called then back to the U.S. As U.S. missionaries? And then how did you end up getting back?
Wow, that's a big question. Well, I'll tell you, Amy, and you're a great journalist. They're asking the great questions. I think for me, though, I really got to start at the very beginning,
Yeah.
and because my life really is a miracle. When I was born 2 pounds or 3 pounds, 2.5 months premature. In other words, really small and really premature. Doctors came in, they told my parents that if I even survived the night, I'd never walk or be productive. And about a year old, I was diagnosed with cerebral palsy, which is one of the most common disabilities you can have. But it's a lack of oxygen that I got at birth. And so growing up, I was in body casts up to my neck, wheelchairs, couldn't walk. It was in Shriners Hospital, if you know about Shriners. I was there. I'd go to school at Shriners. That's when you're in the hospital a long time, when you're racing your buddy who's also in a wheelchair down to school, and recess is like blood draws, like what a good time, and but God had his hand on my life. One of the real big reasons why we're involved in the ministry is because of my experience as a child. My dad and mom had married early, 19 and 16, if you can believe that. And because having a special needs child, it's a difficult, stressful time. They separated for a year, ended up getting back together, but weren't following the Lord. And we lived in a little town. If anybody's been here, you'll know this place, but it's in the middle of the Mojave Desert in Southern California. It's called Needles, California. It's right on the Arizona border. Quite often people know it because it's the hottest place, sometimes even in the whole world. And my dad worked for the railroad with this special needs boy, me, and we were moving into a house, and the local Assembly of God church said, hey, what can we do to help this family? They just saw our moving truck, said, can we help you move in? And it was that simple act of kindness and compassion. I'd go on to accept Christ at 7 years old in the basement of that Assembly of God church. My dad would get filled with the Holy Spirit, called to ministry. That would shift us, our whole family. He'd go to Bible college, and I'd get called to mission. So at 12 years old, I was with him at one of our Assembly of God colleges, Northwest College at the time, but in the Seattle area, and it was campus days. I thought at the time my dad was a really old college student. He was like 30. I thought, this guy's ancient. I was there at 12 years old in a wheelchair, and the evangelist, a guy named Rich Wilkerson, was speaking. He said, if God were to call you anywhere in the world, would you go? And when God speaks to you, it's undeniable. Even though I was in a wheelchair, I had no idea how that all worked out. God said, go to the Netherlands. I mean, it was really a clarion call, go to the Netherlands. And immediately, this is how I am. I just jump in with everything. I remember getting the Seattle Times and looking in the travel section how much it would cost me to save up my allowance money to go over to the Netherlands. I began to learn Dutch, and so I think that's really the starting point for our whole ministry. And now I'm trying to remember the question in the first place.
Just keep
going.
Well,
you know what it was.
Going. Yeah. I mean, and then what? Then what happened?
Yeah. Well, wow. So from there, and I'm 52 years old, so I'm going to fast forward through this so people don't get nervous, Well, I have to say your Starbucks coffee looks great too. It makes me realize we need to get, after this, we're going to celebrate with a pumpkin spice latte here in the Netherlands. But so I'm going to fast forward through this a little bit, but I was a missionary associate in Belgium for a couple years. It's interesting because I was called to the Netherlands, and I wasn't running from the call, but I also had a real desire to be a sportscaster. So I went to University of Oregon, got a degree in broadcast journalism, became a CBS news anchor reporter, was really going broadcasting. And the interesting thing would happen when I'd be on the set, and I'd have a little earpiece in, and the producer would be talking to me on a commercial break. I started seeing commercials for the Netherlands and windmills and things that weren't on the set, but I was seeing these things, and it was haunting me in a good way, but it was the Holy Spirit just really working in my heart. And so that led me to go work with International Media Ministries. And one of the things I would say to anybody who's considering missions, sometimes, I remember my parents were always really good at saying, hey, Steve, don't project this 40 years down the line. Just go for a year. Go for 6 months. Go for 2 weeks. and they just were always doing that. Like there's not a lot to risk, not a lot of danger, and just go for a year. So I went to work with International Media Ministries in Belgium, and God just began to confirm. Of course, Belgium is next door to the Netherlands, so I go up to the Netherlands. He really confirmed, and I needed that time because I'd worked so hard to get to the pinnacle of success in broadcasting, and here I was, a news anchor, reporter, and to say yes to God's call in my life to missions. And I'll tell you what, that's the other thing I would say is there's not been a single moment where I've regretted, following the call of Jesus to the Netherlands. And so I'm going to fast forward again here, but so I came back, got a master's degree in theology at Assemblies of God Theological Seminary, pastored in places like Utah, Missouri, still single. Okay, and everybody's waiting like, when does he meet his wife? What's the story here? And that's really an incredible story too, because a lot of time I kept thinking, I don't want to go until I'm married. I think that a lot of people think that, and finally I just said, you know what, I'm getting old. I'm 30 years old. I'm gonna need to go to the mission field. So this is at the time in Oregon, and I'm speaking in a church in Southern Oregon, itineration service. I'm approved. I just about have my budget raised. I'm ready to go. In fact, I'm not looking for a girlfriend. I'm dialed in on the mission, and that's it. And well, this beautiful woman walked into my service. That's where I'll let her pick it up. Just where she talks about how good looking I am and all this stuff. So
perfect.
Go ahead, honey.
I'll start from my beginning a little bit, but as a little girl, my mom would always talk about her grandmother who was Dutch, and she collected the blue and white pottery, the Delft ware. And so as a little girl, I always knew about this place, the Netherlands, and really hoped that one day I'd be able to go there, and never saw it as a mission field, but just as a place that was really special to our family. And then at 20 years old, my home church was having a missions trip or a discipleship school down in Mexico. So I was able to go down there for a 3-month discipleship program. And it was working with a special needs orphanage. And just while I was there, that's why I really felt called to missions and also to the special needs community. And so, I really saw how these kids had gone through so much abuse and neglect, and how they really connected to God in their own way, and how he really healed them from what they went through. And so I really felt a passion to see those with special needs be able to just connect with God. And so that's what we're doing now. And so I look back and thankful for that season of God calling me. And after that season, I moved up to Oregon and was helping at a women's shelter there. And my friend said, there's a missionary to the Netherlands. He's going to be speaking at a church here in town, and so you should go hear him. And so I came to his service, and I thought, well, I'll sit in the back, and maybe if I'm not interested, I can go out the back door and won't have to meet him. But then he came right up and introduced himself, and so I really was amazing to me, really, how the Lord brought together my background of the Netherlands and also my experience with special needs. And so it was just, I remember I went to his table after his service and grabbed his prayer card, and I remember thinking, you could put my picture on there too. I think you could fit my picture on there. So he didn't know that. So
no, I didn't know that, but Amy, I have to say, when she walked in, my breath, I'm not just saying this to score brownie points or something, but my breath was taken away. I thought she was beautiful, and I'd heard such great things about her. But I was a little nervous meeting her before I, spoke a message, and so I preached a message, and I'm leaving the sanctuary, and I'm kind of wondering, okay, now that she's seen me and heard my heart, what does she actually think? And I look out of the corner of my eye, and she's at my missionary table picking up my prayer card, and I thought, man, I'm in business, and here we are. So we got engaged after 2.5 months, and then married 2.5 months after that. There's a whole other story here and I'm hoping this whole, and I love, I gotta say, I didn't get paid to say this, but I love your guys' podcast. We watched several episodes last night. Saw some people we knew on there, and it's just wonderful. But I hope it's an encouragement to people that, my story is really a story of the impossible becoming possible.
Yeah.
Even my grandma, she's in heaven now. She used to say, "Oh, Julie's a miracle." She didn't even know her name. She just said, your wife, the miracle.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because she just couldn't believe that God would bring together a woman who had a heart for the Netherlands and was actually, I think you're a quarter Dutch or eighth Dutch. We don't know. She was more Dutch than I am, and here I am. And the other thing was, Julie didn't grow up in the Assemblies of God. So she's Baptist, coming to a Pentecostal service, you can imagine, and how God just worked in all that. And it's really quite the story. So then we spent our second anniversary in the Netherlands, riding bikes to Dutch language school and all that entails. And looking back on it, I just see the grace of God, but I also see that God, and I think this would encourage somebody, if God has called you to something, keep following that call, because to me, and of course, we didn't have dating websites and online dating and all that stuff. It wasn't swipe right or anything. Did we write letters? I think we did email. It was the beginning of emails. So old fashioned, but God, it was like I was trucking down this road, and then Julie just kind of got on the on-ramp, and we just kind of went together, and that's how it's been. And so we were here for 10 years. Of course, you always think as a missionary, man, we're there for life.
Yeah.
Especially us, because, in fact, our son's name is Kees. It's Kees. It's like an old-fashioned Dutch name. Okay. Like, you never meet anybody in America named Kees. It's just, that's how it, and so you don't name your kid unless you're planning on staying the long haul, right? But after 10 years of planning churches and university ministry, working in the red light district, doing compassion ministry, God began to speak to us, "I want you to go back to the States." And so, that was, we have a video that we show, but I talk about how difficult that was.
Yeah.
Every time I'd see a windmill, I'd start crying. I just really, it was a sacrifice to say, we'll go back. So we went back to my alma mater, University of Oregon. We worked in Chi Alpha, starting Chi Alpha University Ministry at my alma mater, did that for 5 years. And then it's really strange how God works. I mean, it's just so, we want the direct path. Point A to point B, but God is a lot of time like point A to point G to point H to Z to Y, and my pastor, who had actually baptized me when I was 10 in Bakersfield, California, said, "Hey, we're starting a new compassion ministry called City Serve with the Assemblies of God. And the whole goal is to mobilize the local church to reach out in compassion, outreach, and discipleship." And he said, "We need a international vulnerable ministry director." And I'll be honest with you, when he told me, I'm like, "Pastor, that I don't even know what vulnerable is," and it's kind of offensive. Like, like, I knew what he was asking me. The guy with cerebral palsy, like, come on, worst kept secret, But it was a tremendous honor at the same time, and I knew the Lord was moving our heart. Now, I will say this, and I think we can say this, that Julie kind of got drafted into what I was doing. So university ministry but she was like, she's 8 years younger. So at the time, she's like the age of the university students, and I'm the old guy. And you did it was a great season of ministry, but her heart was always for special needs, for the vulnerable. And I'm being really vulnerable here myself, as the guy with cerebral palsy. I didn't want to be known for that. Forgive me. I was a TV guy. I didn't even know how to help them and things. And so I'd be like, "That's nice that you have that heart, but we're never doing that." And over the course of time, God really began to change my heart. Like, "Listen, I've given you this testimony. I've given you this story. I believe, I have a friend right now who's going through a divorce, and I keep telling him, just as an example, the darkest nights are what God wants to turn into the miraculous mornings. So a lot of times it's the pain and the heartache in our life that He is actually wanting to use for redemptive purposes, to be a blessing to others around us. It just took me a while to get the memo, I think. And so we did this ministry with City Serve for about 6 years through COVID, everything. Really empowered not only local churches in America, but we got calls from missionaries, Assembly of God World Missionaries, and around the world. And so it was basically, the ministry was like this. Any way we could help the local church reach those that aren't traditionally reached. So we're talking about special needs families, I'm not a stats guy, but just so people know, 20% of the world is considered disabled. Okay, and that's not just the person with disability. That's aunts and uncles and cousins and such a mission field.
Yeah.
Then we started helping with mental health ministry. Okay. And if you struggle with anxiety, like I have at times, or somebody who's had depression or maybe a mental health diagnosis, you know that the church, that is a ministry the church just quite often doesn't know what to do with.
Yeah.
We're like, go home and pray more, please. And then I hope, I hope it works. Nothing wrong with prayer, but we just don't know how to address it. Right. And I've been in churches where I shared about a season of severe anxiety, and at the end of the service, 15 people are lined up at my table whispering in my ear, I have had depression, or I've had a borderline personality disorder diagnosis, or this and that. So we began to equip churches. And by the way, this is all stuff we're doing here now in the Netherlands, right? Okay. Or what about orphans or the elderly, or just areas, little pockets where, they're not going to be reached by a new cafe in your lobby. You've got to go, like Luke 14 says, go to the highways and the byways and compel them to come in. And that's really our heart, what we're trying to do, what we tried to do in America. And then one day, get a call and says, hey, the Dutch Assemblies of God has heard about what you're doing, and they're interested in compassion ministry. Yeah. And, Amy, one thing I'll say that's so just amazing, and I'll get back to special needs, although there's so many areas we represent, but special needs is obviously a common denominator with Julie and I. And, so we started to Google, like, okay, they've got to have special needs ministries, for autistic kids. We know that's in the news nowadays. That's on the rise. Like, what are churches doing? And we Googled, and we couldn't find any special needs ministries at the time. However, there was one person that's really a hero of ours. And you want to talk a little bit about, like, just who it was? And
so it was Corrie ten Boom. Okay. And she originally, before her time with the war, she had a group of people with special needs, and just met with them and helped them to learn about the Bible. And so she's really been an inspiration of just what she did and carrying on her vision and seeing that happen.
Yeah, so that's just one of the things that we Joy could share about this too, but we've started a special needs ministry at our international church. Already have four families and several kids coming. We have a family who they weren't able to come to church for 10 years on a regular basis because they have two autistic boys, so they could never come to church together. Yeah. You want to share the story about just his development even since we've been here?
Yeah, so his parents, they just shared with me that he really didn't like to come to church, and he would stand outside the building and just not want to go in because of the sound of worship, and it was just too loud for him. And so we, at the special needs ministry, got headphones available for kids where just worship was too much. And so he took one of those and a backpack with sensory toys. And so his parents shared that now he asks, when's church? When's church? I want to go to church. So he's so excited to come. Yeah. And it's a place that he feels like he can be a part of as well with his family. Yeah. And another story is about another boy who he has autism, and his mom was just sharing that he's asked to start praying at home since he's been coming to the ministry. And so he's really seeing himself as that God can use him too to bring prayer and bring his family together to pray. Yeah. So it's been really exciting and really a dream come true to see this ministry.
Yeah. One of the great things, one of the things that we believe that's kind of fundamental is that every church can do something, so we've been blessed. Our church was part in starting a ministry, a Christian organization. It's all around the world now, but it's the local chapter here. It's called Serve the City, and the idea is to partner with the city, there to translate it from Dutch, to connect connect with each other by helping each other. Yeah. So, for example, a couple days ago, Julie, Selah, our daughter, and I went to an elderly home, high-rise elderly home in the Netherlands. You hardly believe that you can get in there. But we went in there and we helped with like Christmas activities and help make these little ornaments and stuff. And of course, we're talking about, they say, what do you do? Oh, we're working at a local church here, and we talk about the hope of Jesus, and that's what we're wanting them to feel and experience. And it's just been amazing because I think that compassion just opens doors.
Absolutely.
What's funny about our Christian organization is the city will actually pay us to do outreaches, to do compassion outreaches in the city. It's the craziest thing because we're not talking about a Christian country here,
Right.
But they're like, we love what you're doing, you do it. So this next week we go to a Ukrainian refugee center with 400 people, all families, kids, and we're doing some kids activities, and
That's cool.
everything for us is. Sometimes people don't really know what to do with compassion because they almost think it's like a watered down approach to the gospel.
Sure.
Like evangelism is up here, and if you do a missions team where you're sharing Jesus, then you've really done it. But to be honest with you, we've never seen more fruit than we are right now, with families just coming because they feel the love.
Yep.
Even non-Christians. I was talking to a guy, American guy here, and we talked for about an hour, and he was very successful, worked for Microsoft, and he had lived all around the world, owned all these houses. And then he gets to the point in the conversation, that if you're in ministry, it's always a little uncomfortable. He goes, well, what do you do? Well, we work with special needs families and those with mental health challenges and the elderly. And you know what he said? It kind of blew my mind. He goes, oh, man, I experienced a lot of church hurt, but that's exactly what the church should be doing.
Wow.
And there was this moment of him being drawn to Jesus because he could feel the presence of God in his heart for the most vulnerable. And so it's just been really an incredible thing to see how God's doing it and how others are getting inspired.
Wow. That's awesome. So I think you've kind of talked a little bit about how you had started, some of these different compassion ministries when you were back in the States, and then you talked about how you're doing that now that you're back in the Netherlands. But what was that call to go back? Because I know your heart this whole time, since I think you said you were 7 years old, was to be in the Netherlands. And so when you heard God call you back to the United States, that was really difficult. And so how were you, able to discern God is sending us back? This isn't just my, and it's tricky sometimes, I think, because, God places the desires into our heart, and he wants to, give us the desires of our heart. And so I think sometimes it's tricky to differentiate between God's voice and what we're feeling like we are pulled to do or want to do, especially if it's a good thing, right? But there is that distinction, especially as you grow in your faith, as you get to a place where you're really communing with the Holy Spirit. And so what did that look like for you guys to just be confident in knowing, okay, God is bringing us back, and this isn't just, we just really want to be back there, but we know that this is a new season where God is bringing us back to the Netherlands.
That is such a great question. The reason why that's such a great question is I think that's probably one of the biggest struggles we all have in life. What is really the will of God?
Yeah.
How do I know? We were just talking to our son about dating, because he's around that age.
Yeah.
And I told him, I said, hey, we both dated people we thought God was wanting us to marry. In other words, we get it wrong sometimes. It's by His grace that it didn't work out.
Yeah, amen.
That old Garth Brooks song. I think God probably answered prayers. There is that, and I think the thing we always held really kind of loosely. It's weird because it's such a part of our heart, such a part of our story. It didn't make sense. Why is God bringing us back? So for 11 years, I remember the first couple of years, I'd have dreams of people that I knew here asking us to come back. And I wouldn't even tell Julie because it was too precious.
Yeah.
And it also made me think, well, am I just kind of hoping this happens? And so, when we moved to Bakersfield, California, we really kind of said, what, this will either be a bus stop or, where we'll be here for a few years and then we'll go to the Netherlands, or we're here for the long term. And I think we had come to the place where, Lord, we just want what you want for us. And I think that's the other thing about missions so often, and I've made this mistake, when you have this call at 12 years old out of a wheelchair, God called me to the Netherlands.
Yeah.
but it's really always about following Jesus. I remember when I got ordained, my dad came up and they put this what do they call those things? You know, it's real formal and very sacred moment, right? And he comes up and he goes, "I have a word for the Lord from you." And I'm like, "Oh man," I was single at the time. I thought maybe it's the name of my wife, maybe it's some great inheritance I'll get. I didn't know.
Yeah.
You think it's something big, right? And he comes up and he goes, "Steve, if you just always keep saying yes to the Lord, you're going to have a blessed life." And at the time, I'm like, "That's it." Isn't that obvious?
Right.
But really, Amy, it comes down to, that's what it comes down to. And I will tell you this, that if God speaks to us tomorrow, now I don't think that's in the cards, but if God speaks to us tomorrow, I want you to go somewhere, we would do it. We'd absolutely do it without hesitation, because it's never been, we worship Jesus. We don't worship the call.
Yeah, that's so good.
And I'm going to share a little bit too. I don't think I've ever shared this like personally, but I talked about severe anxiety. Well, that happened some in the last 11 years, because I think what was happening was my identity, I don't want to say like I was worshiping the call, but my identity had become Steve Kramer, missionary to the Netherlands.
Yeah.
And when I left the field, sometimes this happens. I remember, and I hope this doesn't hurt anybody's feelings. I won't mention names, but you have pastors that are disappointed. You have family members that are like, "Oh, we wanted to come to visit you in the Netherlands, and you're leaving."
Yeah.
Like, we didn't fit the expectation of what they thought a missionary. Yeah. Of course, you don't leave and move to a place like Bakersfield, California. Who does that? So I think there was a death of my identity. Is, am I willing to be known for something else?
Yeah.
And in this case, my identity started to become Steve Kramer, representative of the vulnerable, which a lot of times they're the least noticed, most often forgotten segment of society. Yeah. And so there was and now it's so freeing, because as much as ever, we love the Netherlands. I mean, we I can't even tell you how much we love it. We love the language. We love the Dutch language. Dutch people will come up to us all the time like, "Why do you want to live here instead of America?"
Yeah.
They have their little theory on why we're here. Is it the politics? Is it something else? The weather.
Yeah.
No, we just So I think that that's another encouraging thing I would say, is that every season has a purpose. And we say these things a lot, and they become almost like little bumper stickers we slap on our car, but it really is true. Had we not gone back to the States, we wouldn't be doing what we're doing now. Wouldn't see the fruit we're doing now. Wouldn't see these doors that have never opened before be opened. And so I would just say, like my dad said that day, just keep saying yes to Jesus. And if you can do that, keep your eye on the prize. He is the prize.
Yeah.
I was listening to the Bible this last week in the Old Testament. It talks about the Levites, one of the tribes of Israel, and they didn't ever get a portion of the land, because it says the Lord was their portion.
Yep.
And that just hits me every time. Like, Lord, I don't care what you give me on this earth. I just want you. I just want you to be my portion, and that's enough. If it's as a missionary to the Netherlands, but if it's also working in a homeless shelter, or if it's doing something else, you're my portion.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's incredible. So I know you've talked a little bit already about, your kids are all in, and your son just started a youth group, which is amazing. And, they were born in the Netherlands, and then obviously went back with you to the United States, and then, went back with you again to the Netherlands. Can you talk more just about just having kids on the mission field, and even just, journeying through life as people that are dedicated to ministry, and how you've navigated that, because I think sometimes, there's this tension between, I feel like I'm called, but, I don't know, sometimes those doubts come in of, but is this best for my kids, or like moving around, or whatever it may be, your sacrifices that come along with ministry. So can you just talk a little bit more about, just being parents and navigating this life of ministry?
Yeah, do you have something you want to share about it?
I think I think about that's a really great question, and I would say making sure your kids feel just as called and just as part of the calling, and that it's not our calling as parents, but also them, and that they were called here to the Netherlands as well. And I think they were really a part of that journey and a part of that prayer. And even we itinerated together as a family, and they also spoke to churches, and they really saw what that meant to be missionaries, and that they feel just as a part of what we're doing here. And so I think when we came, they came with not like, oh, how am I going to fit in here, but what's my ministry to do, and where do I fulfill my calling, and where does that look like for me? And I think that was just really important for them to have their own calling to stand on, their own word from God, that they were supposed to be here and not just from us. And it's been really neat to see that from both of them, that they, even people they meet, they'll say, like, oh, I was talking to them about Jesus, and how they really see that for themselves. And so I think even challenges that they come against, they really can stand on, knowing that they were called here. And so it helps when times get hard to know, like, but God called me too.
And there, I think when you do a podcast like this, everything's so smooth and, but I got to tell you, that was not an easy decision, as a family of four, and our son is 6'3", almost 6'4". He's a big kid. Brothers and sisters can be, we're sleeping in cheap motels, we're having days where, you have to put the smile on, before you cross the threshold of the church, and you're having some harsh words, and then you step in and you're in this world of, hey, you want a prayer card? That's real life, isn't it? And I think that's the other thing I would say, and Julie's absolutely right on, but I would also say that we've always coached our kids to the real life situations. There's going to be days where, let's just talk straight, there's days where you get an honorarium or offering that's great, and there's other times that maybe you get nothing, and that happens, and those both are okay, because the mission is still the same, and that's to lift up Jesus and reach people. And then we tried to, like we said, I can't speak anymore without them saying, well, you're not going to have us speak too. It's really like a family deal. I grew up in the 80s, when a German family going to Germany would show up in lederhosen and the little hats with the feather in it. And, I remember those times. It kind of felt like that. I would even make a joke that our kids were going to do a wooden shoe interpretive dance at the end of the service. We didn't ever do that, but we're so thankful we did it, because I really think, and I believe, that the number one discipleship you can do in your life is your own kids. And I've really seen it, because I think we, at one point it was 2 people called to missions, but we really created, with the Holy Spirit's help, obviously he's the one who does it, but we've created 4 missionaries. I don't doubt that in 20 years you might be having a podcast talking to one of our kids about, tell us about, we remember your parents, goofy people. Tell us about, what you got. I mean, and that to me is one of the greatest joys, is just to see that. And they're having, a huge impact here too.
Yeah, that's incredible. Well, you guys have only been back for 2.5 years. So you're kind of, but
5 months. 5 months.
Oh, okay. I was totally off. You've been back for 5 months? Okay. I don't know what I was thinking. Anyways, you haven't been back for very long, but it sounds like you've already, kind of done a lot and started a lot of new things. And so I know, you kind of are still in that initial season. But that being said, kind of just looking forward to 2026, the new year. What are some things that you are looking forward to? What are kind of the next steps, the next stages, some new ideas that you have, or maybe just, continuation of some of these things that you have started, like, what's next with that? How are you going to go deeper with those things? Are there relationships or ministries or things that you're just really excited about, goals that you have?
Yeah. Wow. I think we're in the stage now of, even though we were here before, and we do have some similar friends, but we're in the stage of just building trust and kind of sharing a message that is new. So this last week I preached on the story of Mephibosheth, and how he was invited to the king's table. And as a local church, I asked at the end of the service, and our kids were there too, who's your Mephibosheth? Everybody in the church has somebody that's worse off than them, more needy than them. Who can you invite to church? So we're in this kind of vision casting stage of everybody in this church needs to find your Mephibosheth. And then it's interesting because this organization, nonprofit that we work with, Serve the City, was founded by a church planner 20 years ago. And it's all built on the gospel and Jesus, but because of the work with the city, it's not like it's out there completely. Like we're an evangelistic, it's to connect with the city. So we're trying to figure out, how do we bridge this? And so we just see ourselves as a intermediate, a liaison between the local church. So what we would love to see is that, and we've encouraged our local church, everybody, it's about, if everybody came on a Sunday, it'd be probably about 200 people, right? Okay, so all 200 people need to find something in this city where you're a blessing to those that really need it. And, that's something in America, because we're blessed to have kind of this church culture, and we know about Convoy of Hope, and we know about, Compassion International. We've heard about these things for decades. But there are many places in the world, I think, including here, where those things are not really anything that people have experienced. So we're just trying to expose people. But I tell you, Amy, and prayer makes a difference. If it weren't for God moving hearts, and that's what's so humbling about this ministry for us is, it's never going to be the glamorous thing to take care of somebody with special needs, or somebody with a mental health challenge, or somebody, an elderly person, or an orphan, or a refugee. It's not glamorous. It's not something that you can maybe temporarily get people excited about going to the most broken, but to have sustained fruitfulness, it's really got to become part of your identity. And so that's where we're really trusting the Holy Spirit to help us by example, by going out and just and be in the hands and feet of Jesus, but also just really praying, God, for you to do this, it's the only way it's going to happen.
Yeah, that's so good.
Do you have anything you want to add to that, or is he okay? All right. Always got to check. If you're newly married out there, always check with your wife and say, is there anything else, anything you want to add? Secrets to a good marriage, 101.
That's so good. Well, guys, thank you so much just for taking the time to sit down and to tell us about your ministry and about yourselves and your incredible family. We just really appreciate. I know that our partnership with you guys is fairly new still, so I am just so glad that we found you guys and that we're able to come alongside you and support you from afar and cheer you guys on. And so I know that I am excited to just continue to stay connected and continue to be updated through newsletters and whatever else to see what's next. And we'll have to maybe have you guys on again and maybe hear from your kids and see what they're up to, because it sounds like they're doing some crazy things too. So.
And if I could just say too, Bethel's Rock and what you guys, you can just tell you have a real missions heart, and I'm not just saying that lightly. I mean, you invest so much time with these podcasts and all the things you're doing. We went to your website. It's amazing all the teams you're doing, and everything is it's a mission saturated culture, and I'm sure other missionaries have said this, but it doesn't happen without churches like Bethel's Rock, and so we're really blessed, and we've been looking forward to this opportunity. And we just, saying thank you. There's times you say thank you for your coffee, or, but there's times that thank you really means something. So we just say thank you from our whole heart for sending us here to the Netherlands.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you guys.